He is a Filipino economist who served as Socioeconomic Planning Secretary, Director General of the National Economic Development Authority, and Secretary of Finance. And he founded two advocacy institutes committed to governance reforms, the Institute of Corporate Directors and Institute for Solidarity in Asia. With us now for more on thought leaders, the chairman of the Center for Excellence in Governance, Dr. Jesus P. Estanislao. So good to see you, Doc Jess. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
So you've had a pivotal role in not just one portion of governance, but two. That's public governance and corporate governance. How are we doing on both counts when it comes to Philippine governance as a whole?
My view is that over the past 25 years, we have set a good base, both for public governance and corporate governance. Let me start with public governance because that is what most of our people are concerned about. Before, people were saying you cannot fight against corruption and you cannot make the Philippine government function better. And I disagree. We think that we can bring down the level of corruption, and I think that the Philippine government can serve the best interests of our people better. So I started an advocacy for both the public sector and corporate sector. Now, where do you begin when we come to public governance? I said instead of staying at the top where I had been as Secretary of Finance, I had to grapple with national issues. I said when it comes to public governance, better to start at the grassroots. Local government units, and little bit by little, quite a number of national government agencies. We've set that base. We have worked with 250 public sector institutions that have gone through our program, which is really based on the Harvard Business School Balanced Scorecard, but we adapted it to Philippine conditions. And above all, conditions at the local government level and at the national government level. We started, for example, with the city of Naga, with Jesse Robredo. And then, of course, Governor Garcia, when he was mayor of Balanga City. And we experimented. Can we get all of these foreign concepts to work in the Philippine context? And we said yes. So public transparency, for example, Mayor Jesse, all of the purchases of City Hall, he posted in a public website. Pencils, this is how much it cost. Cement bags, this is how much it cost. And people realize, wow, our money is put to very good use. Same thing would be true with the city mayor of Balanga, now Governor Garcia. He said, our poverty level in Bataan was something like 45%. Can we bring it down in 3 years to something like 15? He actually did it and brought it down to 10. So we started proving, can corruption be brought down? Can poverty be addressed? Can public governance address many of the concerns of people? Now we've worked with various cities. For example, Iloilo, when we started, 0 BPO jobs. Now, you know how many they have? 46,000 BPO jobs in the city of Iloilo. And in the process, the city of Iloilo has been transformed. So the message that I have is, we have a base, we have proven that local government can work, national government agencies can work. I can tell you, for example, the situation of the Philippine Army and the Philippine Navy today is very different from what they were before 2010. To a point where the collaborative of Norton and Kaplan at the Harvard Business School elevated them to the Hall of Fame. Our Philippine Army, our Philippine Navy, brought to the Hall of Fame because of the transformation that they were able to show to outside observers that in fact transformation is possible.
It's a good basis, you said, but it's 25 years in the making. I wanted to bring this down to you and me and the folks listening to us and watching us. How do I know that I am a model of good governance? And how can I tell if a brand that I'm supporting is a model of good governance? Because it's not only in public, but also private, and in the corporate sphere where governance should exist.
May I mention three very specific examples? Let's take a look at the province of Bataan. They brought governance down to the level of families. How governance can be observed in a family setting. And the transformation there is amazing. You got the families together, becoming much more progressive, the children becoming more participative and more studious because they have to keep their scholarships in the province and so on. And moreover, for example, in Bataan, they have 12 towns. Every month, one of the towns will sponsor a fun run. And the idea of the governor was, for this month, it will be this town. For the next month, another town. No, the entire province comes together and actually participates. It brings people together. And the next question to ask is, what can we do to make the province really progressive that we can be proud of? Citizen participation. So that's at the, now for example, public sector hospitals. It's amazing. When we started, if you have a heart problem and you're a Filipino and you're in Cagayan de Oro, you have to come to Manila. You know what the Philippine Heart Center did? We said our facilities will be brought to 5 other cities in the Philippines. So you do not have to come to Manila. You can go to Davao, you can go to Cagayan de Oro, you can go to Cebuan, you can go to La Union. You can have your heart operation there rather than having to come to Manila. That's actual public service. Now, in the corporate sector, it's amazing what has been going on. Before, we had no private sector institution, business, that could qualify for ASEAN standards of corporate governance. Now, they're part of the ASEAN Corporate Governance Scorecard. You have more than 20 Philippine corporations that are scoring anywhere between 100 and 118 and making them among the best within ASEAN. So that's a base. Is it felt? Yes.
In what way?
In what ways? For example, Cebu Landmasters, the way how they develop their own properties and so on, they make sure that since they address the low middle income classes, that the facilities that they have are livable, they are common facilities, good for humane living. And this is spreading. First in the Visayas and Mindanao, now that company is moving into Luzon. So that's good public governance, catering to the OFWs, and making sure that the first home of a Filipino family that is supported by OFW earnings is something that they can be proud of. That's what corporate governance does.
I wanted to pick up on what you said about public participation because that's the most important component, that the public get to take part in these good governance initiatives. Do we have enough of that? Is the
Yes.
public doing a lot more than it should
Right now, yes.
in the context of the midterm elections?
I am working, for example, with the city of Baguio, with Mayor Magalong. It's amazing what that mayor is doing. He's bringing governance down to the 109 barangays. And the very first thing that he's talking about is, can we collect the garbage of every barangay and recycle the garbage so that it becomes a useful construction material, which can be used with any barangay. And he is bringing public governance down to what does it mean to make the city of Baguio walkable. We're actually constructing sidewalks with trees and everything. Those are what public governance can do. And they will become a city of the future that will be a model for green architecture by 2043. But in the meanwhile, what do we want to do by 2028? 2 years or 3 years? They want the city of Baguio to become a model in implementing the universal health care law. So that, in fact, instead of complaining about PhilHealth and whatever have you, what does public governance do? Bring healthcare down to the level of the barangay under the leadership of local government. And of course, with participation coming from the national government.
Well, now that you mentioned PhilCare and the controversy surrounding it, how can we then use public participation to ensure we don't get to this point where it's out there in the news and it's a bit messy in terms of healthcare? How can the public take part constructively to get something going that benefits them, benefits the whole country?
Public can participate the way how they have participated in the city of Naga under Jesse Robredo. Everything is transparent, they can check, and they can say, hey, there's something wrong here with the way how this material is purchased. For example, a lot of complaints in public health is medicines are very expensive. And we're supposed to have generic law. All of these things can be posted, and the citizens would know, I need this medicine for fever, I need this medicine for cough or whatever it is. They would know, and those medicines would be available under PhilHealth.
How do you make them accountable, those who fall short?
Simply by getting the mayors accountable, and therefore getting the Department of Health accountable. We're very fortunate that for the past 12 years or so, we've worked at ISA with the Department of Health. And it is amazing. The professionals who are there are really committed to cleaning up the system and making sure that the standards of service of all public health hospitals get to the general public with good customer care.
Which brings us back to the private sector and what they're doing in terms of good governance. Let's say, as you mentioned in the healthcare sector, how does that work then? Bringing everyone in the ecosystem together to create good governance that benefits the industry as well as the country.
Yeah. Well, we're starting with the public sector because that is where ISA has been concentrating. We work with all 80 public sector hospitals scattered all throughout the country that are connected with DOH. As we speak, we have 4 of those public sector hospitals going through our Revalida process, presenting what they have accomplished and in fact being graded by the Department of Health. Now, the private sector hospitals, we've left them to themselves because they're in good hands with Manny Pangilinan and now the Ayala's getting into, we'll get to them, but we've started with the public sector hospitals.
Does it typically start in the public sector, or do you think the private sector is raising up the cudgels first before anything happens at scale?
Yeah. Yeah, they need to cooperate because healthcare is a system from tertiary, secondary, primary. Now we're starting with the public sector. Eventually, we'll connect all of the hospitals together.
I'm thinking about education next. I mean, if we can discuss governance in that sense, then we could probably get rid of the learning crisis that has long
We are
dogged
starting
the educational
with
system.
The Department of Education. This was happenstance in the sense that Tarlac School District had worked with Balanga City before, and they said, let's apply a governance system to the Tarlac School District. Now, Tarlac is part of Region 3. Because Secretary Angara knew about the Tarlac experience, he said, why don't we experiment with the whole of Region 3? So that, in effect, the entire public school system is used as the seedbed for instilling the governance values of magka-Diyos, magkatao, magkakalikasan, magkabansa, and upskilling so that, in fact, all of these computer skills get to be brought down to the level of the grade school and high school. That is being done. Now, we will succeed with Region 3. And the idea that DEX has is that if we succeed with Region 3, we can spread it to all of the regions. That is the public school system, which happens to educate most Filipinos from grade school to high school. Now, the private universities, that's another story. We'll get to them at some point in the future.
But the public sector, the public education system, very important because they receive budget cuts.
Yes.
How do we move forward then when you get these budget cuts that would imperil plans and programs?
Yes.
And is governance even considered in a case where money is short?
Budget cuts are very critical, and I've been fighting against all of that. You're talking about the national level.
Yes.
Don't forget that 40% of our budget now is designated for the local governments. Now, in those school districts that work very closely with the local government, they're not suffering those budget cuts, which apply to the national government. So, for example, the school district of San Pedro City, here in Laguna, they work very closely with the city government. The city government ensures that they have the resources to be able to do the programs that they need to undertake. And very important, in the school district of San Pedro, they have connected with, for example, the private sector, so that Dual Tech, which is a private sector initiative, can bring in their technical education to the high schools of San Pedro City. It's an amazing experiment that is making a lot of difference. So that instead of training people to become more lawyers, more philosophers, more educators, you're training skilled workers that immediately would be absorbed by Philippine industry. And this is going on now, district by district and with various city governments. Now, since we work with LGUs, all the LGUs that we work with immediately work with their public schools.
But to your point on the national budget, the budget cuts that happened earlier this year caused a furore. Public didn't like what had happened when those budget cuts happened. How could we look back to that to ensure that that doesn't happen again, that there might be a little bit more public, maybe public participation towards good governance in the way of budget planning?
That's why I spoke up when that budget cut was done, because it is against the Constitution. And, you know, they're taking money away from public schools to fund the favorite projects of congressmen, which is really used as a way for advertising themselves and campaigning for public office. People had to speak up. Secretary Del Rosario, who succeeded me in the Department of Finance, spoke as well. And we had to put public pressure on our congressmen, on our senators, and say, hey, public money is not for your pocket. It is for education, it is for public health, it is for the needs of the ordinary people. And this is something that we have to keep on reminding people. Like when I was Secretary of Finance, one of the biggest items that we had to spend for was a subsidy for oil consumption. It makes sense. As much as 9% of our budget was going to subsidizing the consumption of oil. And most of the users of subsidized oil were rich people because they were the ones who owned the cars. So I said, take it out. Forget about that system. I took it out. Very unpopular, but we stuck it out. And we're able to save that 9%, which enabled our Philippine Air Force to fly more planes, which enabled us to do many more public services, simply because we got that drain out, the 9%, and we made it available for higher priority expenditure items, such as the requirements of the school districts, the requirements of the Department of Health, and the requirements of DSWD.
Just to put this into context in today's times with the escalation in the Middle East, would you fight against any subsidies?
I would, because it doesn't make sense for us to subsidize. We have to make the markets work. You see, the moment oil prices go up, and we allow oil prices to go up, people will look for ways and means by which they can save. Now, obviously, they cannot do that 100%. So they'll have to suffer a little. And that's why we have a stake in the Middle East conflict. We have a stake in what Iran will do if they're going to keep open or close the Hormuz Strait. So we are part of that war. And whether we like it or not, we possibly are going to be affected in a bad way.
We will, because we're a net importing country.
We are net
So
importing.
in this scenario, Doc Jess, what would you then recommend as a whole of nation approach? Just getting everyone together, practicing good governance, in the way of surviving or even thriving under this kind of escalating Middle East tensions that raised the price of crude oil?
When I was in government, our economy was growing at 1 or 2% because we had to do quite a lot of squeeze. But by the time we left, the economy was already growing 5 or 6% during the Ramos administration. And it is the level at which we've been growing. And we've kept it because of the openness that we have given to the Philippine economy. OFW, business processing and outsourcing, and shifting our economic base from sugar and coconut to IT-related products. Okay, that has been done. We're growing at 5-6% per year, which makes us one of the fastest growing economies in Southeast Asia. Many Filipinos don't do that. Is that enough? My answer is no. We have many other resources which we can tap, which will enable us to grow from 5-6% per year, easily 8-10% per year. What are those resources? First, our people resources. I was talking about upskilling. Many of our high school graduates can be upskilled and immediately put to work with Philippine industry. And as a matter of fact, Lufthansa uses the Philippines as a resource base for their technicians. They had an extension office here in Manila because they found Philippine labor very good. And they brought many of these Filipinos to Frankfurt. Now, this is one thing which we need to do, build on our human resource base. And if we do that, easily you can grow 6.5-7% per year. The bigger challenge is, what do we do with our vast land resources, which we are not using, our sea, our marine resources, which we're not using, our water resources, which we're simply allowing to, and all of these things. Through coordinated public and private sector, we can make the Philippine economy grow by 8 or 9%. As we speak, I know of a Filipino invention that enables us to generate electricity from the magnetic forces in the air. Patented, ready to be tested. We'll know the results in about 2 months. If this succeeds, it's amazing what we can do. We can bring water even to our farthest islands because we can desalinate it. And we can put together the different MSMEs that are scattered all over the country into small industrial estates, which will enable us to grow at 9-10% per year. Sustain that over a period of 15 years or 20 years. Instead of being among the top 30 economies in the world today, we will be among the top 15 economies of the world.
So
it is possible.
That opportunity lost then between 5 and 6, where we're at, and 8, 9, 10%, you would consider bad governance?
Good governance can make all of that difference because it enables us to use our human resources much better and our natural resource much better.
But we're not. That's why we have that gap. So that's
where
a
governance
picture
comes
of
in.
bad governance.
Yes.
What do we need to do then?
We need to connect the dots.
Why
now
are we
that
not
we
connecting
have
the
base,
dots? What's going on now in the current setup?
Because each one of us are thinking about our own respective institutions. There are very few people who are thinking about the country taken as a whole. In order to think about the country and work for the country, you have to connect the dots. Let me give you the example of water that comes down from Sierra Madre and Arayat and all of these mountains that we have in Luzon. Most of it goes to the sea. In the process, we do not catch it. We do not allow it to irrigate our fields. Each one of us would have their separate water districts which charge very high prices for the water. We're not coordinated, and therefore we cannot grow a rice in a systematic way because each one goes off on his own. Why don't we Filipinos organize ourselves through cooperatives and whatever have you? That's what good governance is. Connect the dots to make sure that this water that we have, instead of flooding our streets, becomes a useful resource for Philippine industry, for Philippine agriculture, and for the Philippine population for safe drinking water. The technology of it is available. And by the way, Secretary Singson, Babe Singson, who knows many things about all of these things, say, There is no need for extra money. There is enough budget in the Philippine government. If we put them together, we can put all of the infrastructure to tap our water resource, which is, by the way, super abundant because it rains quite a lot in the Philippines. And that can even be a resource that we can export. It is almost as expensive as oil, which was the case in the Philippines when I was in government. We had oil made available, which was, and our water was more expensive than the oil. So let's wake up to the fact that we have that natural resource, use it through connecting the dots, joining the private and the public sector, working together and say, this is a resource that will enable us to grow 1 percentage point more.
On the local government level, easily, if you can, manageable. You can bring everybody together on the local government level, but how do you then connect the dots to the national government level? Because that's a different narrative.
That's where the national leadership comes in. Somebody will have to bang heads together. If it is not the president of the Philippines, someone must. It can be done for Congress, but only if we have intelligent senators and concerned congressmen. You have some of those people in Congress, but they have to pull themselves together and say, this is a national agenda for the transformation of the Philippines in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, in the next 15 years. There can be a national agenda. And we've started from corporate governance and I say public governance, say that national agenda can be put together easily and we can apply the governance discipline so that performance targets are set every year and accountability is set for the different players, both the private sector and the public sector. Can be done.
Are they not speaking enough, though? You've mentioned that there are who are practicers of good governance in government, but are they falling short
Yeah.
of actually fighting for the public?
I'll tell you, the Civil Service Commission has done its job. They have, for example, a personal strategic management system and so on. The Philippine Army is doing its job. DTI, I think, is doing its job. But there are bits and pieces. What we need to do is pull all of them together and say, can we pursue this national transformation agenda based on 3 areas? How do we use our human resource better? How do we tap our natural resource bases? And the third, very basic, how do we build our financial and capital markets stronger? Because we're lagging behind there. And we have all of these finance people who are supposed to be very intelligent. They're there. But each one is doing their own separate thing. Nobody is thinking of the Philippine system as a whole.
That's why low savings rate and no transmission towards investing the money.
That's
That's
right.
just sitting in banks.
That's right. Take, for example, one sector that we are very proud of, OFW. Very good. They transmit more than $30 billion a year. But most of that is frittered away into consumption. The consumer market is good. However, our savings rate is very low. Why can't we provide packages to all of these OFWs which are attractive to them so that they connect it with their housing needs, they can connect it with their educational needs and so on. In the process, you raise the level of savings. And the moment you raise the level of savings, then the markets can begin growing much better. And then if you have SEC and the PSE working together instead of at cross purposes against each other, we can easily catch up with Thailand because we have the resources.
That's another ecosystem, the SEC, BSP, the Capital Markets Development Council, and the corporate directors of your institutes. Where's the friction then? How come it's not working out as you wish?
Right now, when I was Secretary of Finance, I put up the Capital Market Development Council, which bring all of these things together. After I left, they had their own different missions. No? Now, what we need to do is to pull together. PSE and the SEC can and should work together. Instead of having very different requirements, making it very difficult for Philippine corporations to list, to become an issuer of bond, or to be a participant in the capital market, makes it very, very difficult. We charge the highest fees in ASEAN for being in the stock market and for issuing bonds. That makes sense. The only thing we need to do is to coordinate. Now that Francis Lim has become the chairman of the SEC, I see greater hope that in fact there will be greater coordination. But especially with participation of FINEX, Management Association of the Philippines, ICD is taking a lead, and ISA will be very much in the background.
And there's an enabling law. The CIMEPA is going to start in July 1st,
Right.
which makes it more attractive to invest in the capital markets.
Yes.
But what impact specifically to the retail investors?
You know, what we need to do is, these are items that you need to connect. You have, for example, millions of MSMEs. Most of them do not have any access to bank financing even. You can imagine how difficult it is to run a business unless you have access to credit. Now, that's the very first thing we have to address. That means, therefore, that you have to have financial literacy, the basic discipline of financial management. Who is going to provide that to the MSMEs? You expect the DI to do that? No. This is where Phoenix comes in, MAP comes in, the banks will come in. Together, we can provide that, to provide that accessing, that facilitation service, so that the MSMEs will have not only financial discipline, but also market orientation, but above all, the technology that they need in order to become more competitive. All of this will have to be a synchronized program. It cannot be done by one institution alone, but 4 or 5 institutions working together. Amazing what can be accomplished.
A clarion call, I would say, as we are approaching the 4th State of the Nation address by the
Yes.
President. What would you like to hear from him in the way of good governance, and what else can be done in the last 3 years?
What I would like to see, since we're talking about citizen participation, and President Marcos himself talks about citizen participation, he calls for a multi-sector governance council in all government agencies and in all LGUs, so that in fact the private sector, civil society would work together with government to pursue a governance program in the next 2 years or 3 years to lay the basis for what we will be doing in the next 25 years. That is a legacy he can. We are doing it in ISA, Multi-Sector Governance Council. It's amazing what they can do. I just sat down with the Multi-Sector Governance Council of Baguio City. Amazing what those citizens have in terms of ideas, in terms of banging heads together. Let's work together. They can make a lot of difference. The secret of Bataan Province, they have a very active multi-sector governance council. And by the way, Naga City under Jesse Robredo, eventually would expect that Lenny Robredo will be picking up. The People's Council of the City of Naga has been working very well. If we can do this all across government, and for the President to call for citizen participation in the governance of our public institutions. By the way, this is being done already in the corporate sector. We have independent directors that are mandated by law, and they're making a lot of difference in the way how corporations are managed. Let me give you a very specific example. This is even as a startup who was asked by a small company in Cebu, Vis Motors, and say, we're not yet publicly listed, but we want to do corporate governance at the outset. So I'll help them. Board of directors, multi-sector. You know, in 3 years, they were able to grow from 200 million in terms of sales to more than $1 billion.
What made
Good
it work?
corporate governance.
How so?
Well,
How did good
in
corporate
the
governance
first
bring in
place,
sales?
they, Multi-Sector Governance Council, opened the facilities for them so that they will have access to bank financing, which they did not have before. Security Bank came in. With a good governance council and a good board of directors, you can make the banks much more comfortable with you if you have good persons who are serving in your company.
And not as an afterthought, it was embedded right from the start.
That's right.
Your vision is for 25 years, and it brings to mind Dream Philippines 2046. That you launched about 3 years ago at the tail end of the pandemic. How far ahead are we or far behind your timeline to 2046? And what really is that vision of the Philippines in 2046?
A vision of the Philippines for 2046 is instead of being top 30, you should be top 15. Instead of being able to grow at 5-6% per year, let's aim to 8, even 10%, but sustain it on the basis of what we already have. OFWs are not enough. The BPO sector is not enough. We have to have the entire human resource base of the country used as an asset. For example, the construction industry. Low skill. Can we bring up the skills of everybody in the construction industry so that we can begin competing not only in the Philippines, but also in the other countries outside? We're already sending Philippine labor outside. Why not our Philippine corporations actually bringing in Philippine technology with Philippine labor, not only in the Philippines, but outside? That's a huge market. We have a demand for construction here. The entire neighborhood in Southeast Asia has a demand for construction. Can we organize ourselves with a governance program, with an ethical program, with technological upgrading, and the upskilling of our labor? It's amazing how many doors you can open to much higher levels of income.
And how many more in maybe the youth you can convince? But how do you do that with governance so high up as an idea? How do you bring that down to them? Especially as you're still very busy with UANP as Chairman Emeritus, having all those engagements with the millennials, the Gen Zs, that you're trying to convince that it's their future that we're trying to protect here and also sustain.
One of the things I'm very happy about UANP is that we have an entrepreneurial management program. And when I was president of UANP, I met those who were just graduating, and I've kept in touch with them. You know, several of them have become great entrepreneurs, and they keep on improving themselves, enrolling in the entrepreneurial program of MIT. And they've been doing very well. And they're creating a network. This is what we need to do. Show very concrete examples, very clear pathways by which the young people can really move out and begin proving themselves. Dual Tech, for example, is a great example. High school graduates given 2 years of technical training, proper work orientation. You know what the industry in Canlubang is saying? We want Dual Tech graduates because they are not only skilled, they have also the proper work orientation. Don't stop there. Go for lifelong learning for all of these people who have become richer. By the way, several of them are already working abroad as not only technical people, but supervisors, because they keep on improving themselves. That's what we need to do, just to show the way, open the possibilities, and keep on pressing our people.
So what do you tell them? What's it to them to show good governance now so that Dream Philippines 2046 will be a picture of the vision you just said?
Yeah, one institution at a time, one government agency at a time. But at this point, what we need to do is to have the mechanisms for connecting the dots, to get the citizens to participate more. This is our country we need to build. And instead of thinking only about our affairs, what can we do together in order to solve the water problem that we have in Bulacan? What can we do together? Some of our friends are already doing it. They're doing not an experiment, but a real successful thing. 5, 6 businessmen working together. They go to Nueva Ecija, they work with the farmers there. 3 harvests already. You want to know what they have done? They increased the income of the farmers by 40%. And moreover, they also have made money for themselves. Connecting the dots, doing well, by doing something very good.
And it's a good baseline and a lot of ideas there thrown out and a call to action. Thank you so
Thank you.
much, Doc Jess, for the
Thank you very
opportunity.
much.
Appreciate the insights. Catch us again next Thursday at 9 p.m. Philippine Standard Time on One News. You can also check out the long conversation on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. And if you haven't done so, like or follow my social media pages. I'm Cathy Yang. This is Thought Leaders.